Good morning.
Good morning. Hi,
Evening
Ralph.
for
How are
you.
you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Great. Wonderful. Nice to see you here.
Nice to see you here, just sitting here with the book.
Hello and welcome to the Lucas Alexander Show. I'm Lucas Alexander in Copenhagen, Denmark. It's the 4th of December 2023, and this is my special series, Remembering the Queen of Rock, Tina Turner, who sadly passed away on May 24th, 2023. Today, my special guest is an American professor from the Stanford University who has studied religions and specifically Buddhism. He's here to talk about his book, Dancing in My Dreams, and about Tina Turner and her legacy. Ralph Craig III. Dr. Ralph Craig III, thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you, Lucas, for having me. I've watched your interviews a number of times over the years, and now it's a pleasure, but also quite wild to be on it myself.
How wonderful. And I hope we can meet one day. We never met over the years, and it will be interesting to hear your Tina story as well, because, I became a fan way, way back when I was a child, and I have certainly seen a lot and been around the whole Tina legacy in a way, her history, and being able to attend so many wonderful shows. So
Hmm.
thank God we have that. We've had that experience, and she was such an amazing lady. We will never see the like of her again. But before we talk a little bit about your background and history, I'd love to ask you this first question. Why Tina Turner for you to have written this book, first of all, but also what did Tina Turner mean to the world in show business, and what will be her legacy?
Why I wrote this book, I think that's related to the second question you asked, which is right. What does she mean to the world and to show business? I think many people who saw her live in concert, as I did, I think that they experienced a charm and a charisma and an energy coming from her that was beyond, partially constituted by the setting, right? The stage, the lights, the dancers, the music, but also beyond that, right? Centered on her. And I think we have to remember that she was very unique in her time because, unlike, of course, there was the Ike and Tina Turner Review for 16 years, but really once she became a solo artist, unlike some artists, for example, the Rolling Stones, right? Mick Jagger, of course, has done solo work, so has Keith Richards. But when you go to a Rolling Stones show, there are so many band members and elements to pay attention to, right? But for Tina Turner, she was the show. It was her name on the marquee. No one was going to see, um, X dancer. No one was going to see of course, those people had, especially somebody like the late John Miles or the late Kenny Moore, of course, they had their own careers as well. But in a Tina Turner show, Tina Turner was the show. And so this woman had so much charisma and energy and such a power emanating from her that people could feel throughout the venue, right? And it comes through on record, it comes through in her interviews that there's this energy and this light. And I think that explains partially why when she passed, such a diversity of people and institutions felt the need to put out a statement, right? NASA, the US president, of course, the mayor of Kuznach, where she passed. In England, Prince or King Charles, and so on and so right, all over the world, so many institutions and people felt the need to say something about her death because she had this tremendous global impact. And that then goes to partially why I wrote the book. I think that that impact that she had was partially explained by, and for her, rooted in her spiritual practice, right? She was a deeply spiritual person going back to her childhood when she was Black Baptist, and also she also drew a significant amount of inspiration from, right, the Black Pentecostal church. So being Black Baptist and Black Pentecostal, all the way down through her engagement with psychics and metaphysical religion in the mid 60s, up to her conversion to Buddhism in 1973, and so on and so forth. She was always deeply spiritual. So a part of that power coming from her was partially rooted in her depth of spiritual practice.
Hmm. And it's very true that she impacted so many people around the world. And she came from Nutbush, Tennessee, and I know you just went there, and I've been there as well. And it's wonderful to see the museum there, and also to see where she was brought up. I mean, there's practically nothing. And for such a dreamer to become such an amazing star, and even when you said everybody came to see Tina, it was Tina they came to see. But when she was part of the Ike and Tina Turner review, she was the breadwinner. People did not come to see Ike. Sorry, even though he was a gifted musician, they came to see Tina and not the Ikeettes. But that whole thing they did together. But it was always Tina. I mean, it's almost like, and I've spoken to people about this, even when Tina did her dance moves and the dancers did the same thing, which she instructed, it was always different how she did it. Her movements different, even though they did the same. You couldn't pinpoint what that was, but she was unique. It's almost, I say this lovingly, but it's almost like she was an alien from another planet, because she was emanating something that is beyond the hair, the lips, the legs, the short dresses, and all that. It's more profound. It is spiritual.
And I think, if I can just say, I think that from what I've gathered in the interviews that I conducted and the research that I did, and just from interviews I watched, I think that Ike Turner as well felt that, when she didn't look the part to him, so he didn't pay much attention to her. But once he heard her and saw her perform, so to speak, he also saw that thing, right? And we have to remember with Ike Turner, he was primarily in his early years a talent scout. So he knew, of course, he played piano first and then guitar, but when he was hired by record labels when he was younger, it was to scout talent, to help them find other talent. And, Ike Turner was partially integral in the discovery of Elvis Presley and other such figures, right? He was a talent scout. So when he saw Tina Turner sing during that intermission when she was given the microphone, he knew talent when he saw it, right? That was his whole thing. And his band, the
Kings of Rhythm.
Kings of Rhythm, yeah, the Kings of Rhythm, right? He picked those musicians; they were talent. He picked talent. So he also saw that she had this magnetism and this quality And I think a part of it, if you see that interview, the outtake, it didn't air in the live Oprah Next Chapter interview, but in the outtake on YouTube where she talks about having to rest all day to get through the final tour, she says that she rested all day because she saw their faces, right? She knew what it meant for people, two people, for her to be on stage. So I think that she always had this quality to give everything to her audience. She was not a selfish artist on stage. She connected. She would turn around and smile at her musicians or direct them or share the stage, like on the last two tours, giving her dancers an opportunity to have the spotlight and letting John Miles, do his thing, right? Because he was a singer in his own right. And letting Kenny Moore carry the show in the 80s, right? During intermissions, I mean, during costume changes. So I think that what the audience and her public saw from her was pure light and generosity.
Absolutely. And something, I've been to so many shows over the years, and sometimes I even remember that famous Wembley show in 2000 that we all have know from the videotape. I'm there first row, but I remember something specific. There were two ladies standing in front, and they kept standing there as the song, Tina's song, dancing in my no, that was actually no, that was the previous tour, the Wildest Dreams tour. I was also at Wembley Stadium for that one, and I remember when that song came on. It always came on at the end, and those two women, they were just standing there crying, like really almost not hysterically, but like just crying. It was just streaming down their faces, and I've seen that many times. How after the show, Tina really touched something inside of people's, in their core, in their soul, in their entire being, in a way. Of course, she did that to me as well, but I was kind of privileged to go to so many shows, and it was a different time. But of course, it triggered something. It was almost like going home every night for those several tours. It's something from beyond. That's why that's title is great, Beyond, right?
Yes, exactly. One of the dancers on the promo tour for GoldenEye, right? So just before the full promotion of Wildest Dreams, and she did a couple like award shows and things where she was singing the song GoldenEye. So this is in 1995, 1996. One of those male dancers who were, one of the like Bond guys,
Yes.
he said that her attitude was, and this comes through, he said her attitude was when people come to see you in a show, you can't just think of them in the audience at that moment. For many people, it's a whole production for them to come to see you, right? They fly somewhere, that costs money. They're staying in hotels, that costs money. They're taking off work, or they're bringing family members with them. Wherever they go, they have to eat for the days that they're there. And then getting to your show, there's parking. They bought the ticket, so it's a whole economy that is being built. So you owe them. You have to give them a show, because for them, you're doing this every night for a year or two, but they're just seeing you maybe that one time, and they've made a lot of sacrifices to do it. And so I think she made sure, and I think that's the thing that I wanted to get across in the book, but also, in my own way of thinking about Tina, is that it comes through when you interact with her, when you see her live, that she's really there with you, you know, she's not somewhere else. And I love that moment in the HBO documentary when she's talking about, not having love and all this stuff. And she's sitting backstage, during the Break Every Rule tour. And I think they're either in Dortmund or at Wembley Arena, but I think it's Dortmund. And she's sitting backstage and she's like putting her makeup on. And then, she like walks up the staircase, and then you see her turn on, right? She's kind of, quiet, and she's being walked up the stage, and you see her shoulders kind of moving. And then the light comes up and she steps on stage and she's fully on. And you feel that whatever was happening for her before and whatever will happen for her after the show, she's there for the people for those 2 hours. That's a special thing. That's a powerful thing. The show becomes about togetherness. And Beyond, the message of the Beyond albums was partially was one, the title, right? Beyond, touching that spiritual place beyond, but also unity, bringing people together. And I think that's what she was about. She was about deeply reaching into something beyond yourself and outside of yourself and tapping into that within, and also using that to bring people together. And I think that that's what she did well, and that's her legacy.
It's very well explained, and I also feel that for a lot of people, especially in Europe, where we're not so religious, really, maybe in the southern part, but in the middle part and the northern part, religion is not the same as it is in many places in the States, especially in the South. But for a lot of the fans, and that's why it's difficult to explain fandom. What is that? Because that it's kind of looked down upon it because it can be too much, too fanatical, too ridiculous. But, and maybe there were those kind of fans also, of Tina. But I personally know so many, and there are so many who feel it's like their spiritual guiding light in a way. I mean, that's what Tina was for a lot of people. And also, there are many people come from very different backgrounds and maybe not always great upbringings, but no matter what, she was something to hold on to. She was always there, and through the dark times, a lot of people could think about what she went through, but also listening to her songs and see her strength and the smile. It became something beyond just being your average entertainer. And I think with her death in May this year, it has really created this hole inside a lot of people and an emptiness in a way because she was always there. She was almost like Tina can't die.
I think that her presence, even in the years when she was between tours, and I think that that was a part of her power as well. She knew when to go away and rest and recharge, and then how to come back and really make a splash, right? um but even in those years when she was off stage, right? So I'm thinking specifically 2000, she did what we all believed and what she clearly believed would be the final tour, because usually her breaks were 2 to 3 years. And so, around, I was expecting in the year 2000, she did the 24/7 tour. It ended December 6th, right? 2000 in Anaheim, California. And I thought, surely she'll be back in 2 or 3 years. 2002, 2003, there'll be another tour. I'm sure of it. That's what I believe. 2002 comes along. We got the Carlos Santana song, Game of Love. And when I heard that song and I thought, oh, okay, she'll be back in a few months to a year. There'll be an award show. Her and Carlos Santana will perform, and it'll kick off. Then, right? Brother Bear came out, the song Great Spirits on the soundtrack to the Disney movie Brother Bear. And I thought, okay, it's starting, because this is how it always was, right? 1994, no Tina. 1995, Golden Eye single came out, a couple award shows, boom. April 1996, tour announced. So I thought, okay, it's starting. We had Game of Love, Great Spirits. Now, okay, we're about to get a show. Then 2004, Greatest Hits album. And I thought, okay, that's not an album, but it's okay. It's coming. A tour is coming. Right. But nothing. And nothing. And it keep going like that. Little appearances. She would pop up at an award show here or a Hans Christian Andersen event there, the Kennedy Center Honors in the US. She popped up, but still no tour. And she didn't tour again until 2008. So it was clear that she really intended 24/7 to be the last tour. But over those years, there was always something that would pop up. But now I think what fans are feeling is right that it's that she's gone for good, that there's no pop-up coming ever again. And that's a difficult thing because as you put so well, Lucas, especially in different parts of the world where religion and spirituality are viewed very differently. The United States is a very religious, almost fanatical place, on the subject of religion. But in a lot of parts of the world, particularly as you said, in mid and northern Europe, there are religious people, of course, but it's not in the same way. So she was that for many of her fans, she was spirituality. The things she said in interviews, she taught her fans how to go through difficulties, how to be ill, how to view your illness, instead of just suffering and falling apart. If the doctors tell you this is it, then you say, well, okay, I guess this is it then. I've lived well. I've done everything I wanted to do. I found love. My mother's gone. My sister's gone. Maybe it's just my time to go. So she taught her fans at every stage how to deal with difficulty, but also, even more importantly, Lucas, and I think about this a lot, she also taught her fans how to think about their job. Because Tina Turner was always very clear that Tina Turner was one side of herself, right? And the other side of herself was anime and all that meant to her. She had a private life, she had a circle of friends. When the That's My Life book came out, the picture book, I was genuinely surprised by the letters in that book from like Ruth Pointer at the Pointer Sisters. And you think to yourself, all these people knew Tina, they knew each other because she wasn't public with her friendships. She was a private person. And I think in that way, then she taught many of her fans how to do your job well, how to give it your all, but not let it consume your life, So at every stage, she was teaching people many of the same lessons that people go to religion to learn. And that is why I wrote the book then, to capture that, to discuss that, where her religiosity is coming from and how that affected her fans and people around the world.
That's so interesting. It's also a very important thing because Tina even said when she had that amazing comeback in the 80s, she said that one day, I think she even said that in I, Tina, her autobiography, that she wanted to do a spiritual book or spiritual lectures or maybe an album or something like that. And I always thought about it over the years, but I thought, well, maybe she's never going to do that. But she actually did. She did with the Beyond albums, of course, with those other ladies, and it was merging and uniting all of these spiritual beliefs and religions, and then Happiness Becomes You as well, which was a very good book as well, also from Tina, that people should read as well. So, and she really talked a lot about it. Was a lot of people, also people that weren't just fans in general, they kind of knew about Tina that she was a Buddhist, right? It really, I mean, a lot of people knew that. And I think the first time she actually chanted Nam Myoho Renge Kyo was on Larry King Live, wasn't it? In '97, I think. I was on the show. as the only man calling in there.
I
Well,
remember. I
I was a
remember
teenager at the time,
yeah.
but I was lucky to get through. But I remember just that was amazing in itself and such a memory. But I mean, also the fact that she was chanting there and really letting go live on it, not national, international television, because we were calling from all over the world.
I remember. I listened live in 1997. I have known of you since then. Um,
Wow.
and that is largely because, like people who are fans. So, there's like three me's, right? There is, I am a scholar. I'm a scholar of religion. That's one me. I am a lifelong Tina Turner fan. That's another me, right? And like most fans, everything she did, you remember the people on the DVDs in the front row, and at this point met many of those people now. You remember who called in on even when she was on a few years later, Chum FM in Canada. I have met some of the people who called in on that show too. So I remember when you were on Larry King Live, and it was mesmerizing to watch her, as you say, she really let it rip. Her real chanting practice. Even Larry King was sitting there mesmerized. Know. Um,
It
and
was a
she, I think,
different Tina, a different rhythm. She
yeah,
she could do that. Was no, she was not nervous being live. It couldn't be redone or anything like that.
yeah,
Just went out there, and it's also a little bit brave, right? Because a lot of
yeah,
people will say, also in the States, and people have even said about Tina that that's very occult. They didn't
hmm
understand what Buddhism was, and they thought she had turned her back on her original spiritual practice and all of that, which she
hmm
actually didn't, but it just transformed and she used both, right?
yeah, correct. Yeah, and you're right to point that out, and I discussed this in the book that and I primarily discussed that interview I opened the book with that interview. So in the introduction of the book, I say on February 21st, 1997, Tina Turner appeared on CNN's Larry King Live, and I go through that interview, and then in chapter 5, chapter 5 is called Wildest Dreams, and I also discuss that interview there. I think you're right to point out that many people thought as they saw that, and they saw things like that especially in the United States, they're all about the what the movie What's Love Got to Do with It. It opens and she's in a church, and that makes sense to people. She's walking along the dirt road in Nutbush by the cotton fields, and that makes sense to people. And the kind of even the domestic complexities of her, that makes sense. The grandmother being there for the kids, that makes sense. But when people start doing that, of course, who doesn't love a good song? But when you start chanting and you start talking about chanting, that's when many Americans start to be like, I don't know about that, right? So she had this courage to be herself, and I think that she was aware of these things, and I think some of her fans don't even realize the extent to which she was not just an intuitive woman, but a very intelligent woman. She knew how people was viewing her. She knew what she was doing at any given time. She had a tremendous amount of self-awareness and social awareness, right?
And that
So,
certainly came even more so after leaving Ike or after
yes,
she started. I mean, she started practicing Buddhism in 1973, right? When
yes,
she
yes.
met Valerie Bishop, who was some woman who came at the Bollig Sound recording
hmm
studio, Ike's studio, and she was introduced
Yeah,
that way, and that made her stronger and
yeah,
strong enough to eventually leave. And we do know that Ike thought it was witchcraft. He feared it.
yeah. Yes, she before that, she was looking right, and even Ike allowed, if you will. I mean, she had this interest in psychics that started around 1966 or started in 1966 in London. And she, from there, she would consult with psychics, and Ike knew this, and he would, when he had problems, because he had a lot of problems, he would, she would say, you should see this psychic, and he would sometimes would do it. Um, and that's partially why when the kids, particularly Ronnie Turner, um, got so first it was a recording engineer, Bollock Sound, who told Tina about the practice, and it didn't really take. She kind of listened, and she was like, yeah, yeah, because she saw that whole thing, Bollock Sound, and all that stuff was Ike's world that she didn't have anything to do with. So a lot of the information that was being brought to her in Bollock Sound and around that, she didn't want to spend time there. She didn't want to think about that place. So it didn't take.
Do you know if Valerie Bishop was one of Ike's countless mistresses?
It has never been clear to me if that is the case, because she was married to the jazz pianist Walter Bishop Jr. And she came into Ike's world, or Valerie came into Ike's world because of her, and she has passed on, so don't want to cast aspersions on her character. But she came into his world as kind of a person who she was very interested in music and jazz music and loved R&B and sold, drugs to Ike as well and hung out around Bollock Sound. So it's very possible that she had some kind of relationship with Ike Turner. That's very possible. But I've
Well, he
never been
didn't
able to
shy
prove
away
it.
from going to bed with his musicians' wives, did he?
Yes,
And
correct,
who
correct.
else? We know what that whole thing was. I mean, it was
Exactly.
unbelievable. You cannot believe it, but certainly a whole series could be made of that. I mean, a TV series, not
Yes.
just a movie where you can't really include a lot. But it's just
Yeah.
interesting how you meet certain people, even though they were this or that.
Yeah.
And but this is how Tina didn't have access to the outside world, really.
Exactly. Exactly. So then it was her son, Ronnie, who came home that a friend of his had told him about the practice, and he came home with prayer beads, what are called in Buddhism called juzu beads. He came home with those, and he was telling Tina, his mother, about it, and she thought it sounded interesting, but it's her son. Like, what, are you going to do what your children do? So, and then the next person was Valerie Bishop. But the reason Ike brought this woman to the house to meet Tina is because she wanted to meet Tina, but also the woman, Valerie Bishop, had told Ike a little bit about the practice. And Ike was like, yeah, yeah, just another thing. But he knew of Tina's interest in these kinds of things. And Ike himself had a lot of interest in astrology and occult beliefs and things like that. So he and Tina shared that. It's just that she actually developed it. Tina was reading, especially in the late 60s, she was reading a lot of magazine articles about spirituality, a lot of articles about crystals and chakras and astrology and horoscopes, and she was reading those things and taking them seriously. Many people read a magazine, say like Marie Claire magazine, or I don't know what all the other kind of a Vanity Fair magazine or something. And in particular, and this Vanity Fair is a good one because she had read that for many years. And of course, she would look at the fashion, and she would cut looks out of the magazine and add it to this dream book that she kept. But also, she was reading, how many of us read the astrology section in those kinds of magazines? And this thing is kind of funny, oh, it's like a funny, horoscope, or, oh, I'm an Aries. What does my chart say? But she was reading those and really taking advice from it, So she was a Sagittarius, and it would say, as a Sagittarius this week, pay attention to it. She would do that, she was looking for guidance. She was truly looking for guidance in that way.
And
And
also,
I can,
later on, she would choose her musicians from what their astrology sign was.
yes, yes. And she would observe them, right? She would choose a musician. She would have them put them in a hotel room, have them watch, get their charts done. So I say all that to say that when Valerie Bishop was brought into her world through Ike, it was partially because he knew she had these interests. But it was Valerie was the one who really explained the practice, how to do it, and the purpose of the practice. And when she heard the purpose of the practice, there was no stopping her. When Valerie Bishop and the women connected to Valerie Bishop explained to Tina that you chant these words, it connects to your inner self, and through that connection, you could change everything about your life. There was no stopping her. There was no going back from that point. And I wonder, right? Did Because Tina Turner herself said that by the end, so we're talking about around 1976, and in the aftermath of her leaving Ike, Ike would ask her to chant for him. So, you almost have to wonder if, he kind of went through the stages of grief around, she starts practicing. He is not happy about it, even though it was him who facilitated the connect, as most things in her life, right? It was she wanted to do Proud Mary after she heard the Creedence Clearwater version, and she wanted to do it. Ike said no. Then Tina kept pushing the issue. He said no until he heard the Checkmates version. And if you hear the Checkmates version, right, it's very Ike and Tina's version is patterned off of the Checkmates version. Ike heard the Checkmates version. He became more interested. Tina kept pushing. They started doing it on stage. Record company heard it and said, "You've got to record this. It's the hit." That was Tina, right? Their last big hit, Nutbush City Limits, she wrote, that was her.
Yeah, and their
So,
first big hit, which should have been a huge hit in America because it was Phil Spector and he was Wall of Sound, and he knew how to make the biggest hits in the 60s. River
yeah,
Deep Mountain High, of course, became the number one song in all of Europe, basically.
yeah,
England. So, I mean, everybody knew it here. And later on, of course, it's become a classic also in America. But that was
yeah,
also Tina alone. Phil
yes,
Spector wanted to produce Tina alone, and Ike was not allowed there. Proud Mary
yeah,
was Tina's project. Tina wrote Nutbush, and she wrote
yeah,
basically most of their songs in the later Ike and Tina albums, from
yes.
Feel Good, Let Me Touch Your Mind, Nutbush, Sweet
Bold
Rhode
Soul
Island
Sister.
Red. Lots of these albums are all Tina penned songs.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and we'll get back to what we were saying just before, but I wanted to say this, and I say this in the book. It's in a footnote. Tina often downplayed her songwriting abilities, and she did not write later in her career.
She always did. She always said she never wrote. She always
Yeah,
basically almost took credit for writing Nutbush because that always came up, of course. But she
yeah.
wrote so many songs.
She wrote so
Some
many
of my
songs.
favorite songs were hers. She was
Yeah,
way too humble about it, and I always
yeah,
regret it. And I'm sad that she never wrote any songs in her solo career. Actually, I always wanted
yeah. Yes, she in the BMI catalog. So not people always get these two confused. They're not the same thing. BMG is a rights licensing company, right? BMI and a royalty collection company. BMI is the music and song rights recording um, institute. So BMI is where you will find, if you look in their databases, the songs like that somebody's officially attributed with writing and how they get their royalties from that. In that collection, in that organization, Tina Turner has some 75 or 80 songs that she has written that are licensed by her that write that. So she wrote a lot of material. She produced, people don't write, she co-produced Out of Season, the album, while she was with Ike. So I say all that to say that she, and later in her career, and I write this in the book, she is we should think of her with the songs as a collaborator, right? She often, especially with Private Dancer Break Every Rule, but especially Break Every Rule, she sat with those writers and gave them the lyrics, basically, you know, on every level. So while she didn't write later in her career, she was intimately involved in the crafting of those songs. But I say all that to say that Ike Turner, he it's a very complex story between them because while he clearly didn't value many things about her, he also did value to the extent that he could, and that's a very complex issue. But to the extent that he could, that she was this creative force, that she had this ability to craft a song and work an audience. And, especially for him who was all about the money and the business, you know, if it was going to work, he was willing to do it. You want a gospel album, country album, Acid Queen, Out of Season, anything for the money, whatever would work. If the people want to hear country, put a country album out there. If the people want to hear a blues album, put a blues album out there. And when she started doing the practice, chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, he could see, as everybody around her could see, that she was changing. But by the end, he wanted some of that, and so asked her to chant for him. Right,
That is
this,
so interesting that you're saying that,
yeah,
because that I had never heard, that he had
yes,
actually asked her to chant for her. That's new to me. I knew
yeah,
that he was kind of falling to pieces by the end of their time, and many
yeah,
times they would even go, or at least several times they would go on the road with the review without Ike, because he had been up for days and he couldn't even I mean, he couldn't go. He couldn't do the show. But Tina, of
yeah,
course, would do the show. There are television appearances where he's not there as well.
yeah. Well, and that change that comes over her, I love in the HBO documentary, less the movie What's Love Got to Do with It, but in that the HBO documentary, I think is a perfect example because it's so well done in the middle when when Carl Arrington asked Tina, being as afraid of him as you were and all of this, how did you leave? And she talks about Buddhism kind of changing her. And then she talks about like the actual night that she leaves him. And that's one of my favorite. I argue in the book, end of chapter 3, beginning of chapter 4 of the book. So the chapter titles of the book are, right, Motherless Child, Becoming Tina Turner. That's about, her story with Ike, all of that. Chapter 3, Tina's Prayer, from the song Make Me Over. But chapter 4 is called Becoming Tina, right? So chapter 2, Becoming Tina Turner, but chapter 4 is called Becoming Tina. And
Oh,
I titled it that way because I argue that Tina was born that night in Dallas when she left Ike Turner, right? Anna Mae Bullock, born November 26, 1939. Tina Turner, born August 1960, when A Fool in Love is released. But Tina, right, that night she leaves Ike, because that moment is the culmination of, at that point, 3 years of chanting, realizing that, right, she says this, she came to realize, he would always tell her, Ike Turner would always say to her, "You're holding me back." And she came to realize you're holding me back. I'm writing these songs. I'm at every show. You're drug binging and sometimes can't even make it. You get all this money from everything we do. I don't get anything. And yet I'm the one out here. I'm at every rehearsal. I'm at every show. I'm finding songs. I'm writing songs, you know.
And
So
on top of
she,
that, she had to face beatings and abuse and also
yeah, and you
emotional torture, right?
yes, 100% physical and emotional abuse. And she comes to realize through doing the practice, right? Many people over the years, she said this herself throughout her time with Ike. Many people would come to her and say, Tina, you shouldn't stay here. You don't have to take this. Da, da, da. But when she herself realized that, once she started chanting, that, the wheels started to turn. And so
Why do
that
you
night,
think, Ralph? Why do you think? I mean,
mhm,
Tina was asked this question numerous times by the press, obviously, but why do you think that she stayed for so long? Because 18 years, we know about that they were kind of married for 16, but they were together for like 18 years.
yeah,
Why do you think that she stayed for that long? I do know that she was also the star and there was the children, but I mean, it was
mm,
a lot to go through. I mean, it was
yeah,
a fear factor, fearing his moods and the violence, and
yeah,
that, it was a very tough time.
yeah. I think that I mean, as she said, right, she had made this promise. But we also have to think about the fact that and I write this in the book, this is at the end of chapter one and the beginning of chapter two. When she met Ike Turner, she was meeting a man that was very familiar to her, right? From her background. They have a similar background. She's from rural Nutbush, Tennessee. He was from rural Clarksdale, Mississippi. Now, Clarksdale, Mississippi is a famous place in the blues world, right? In the kind of Delta blues sound and Pine Top Willie Perkins, who Ike really learned from the kind of boogie woogie piano style. Because many people forget that Ike Turner, before he was a guitarist, right, he was a piano player, and that was actually how he made his name. Um, and that kind of boogie woogie piano thing with Pine Top Willie Perkins, eventually BB King, and all these figures coming through Clarksdale, Mississippi. Ike's father was a preacher, right, at what is was Centennial Baptist Church, which is on, I think that was Fifth and Yazoo, at the corner of Fifth and Yazoo in Clarksdale, Mississippi, near the famous train depot that so many blues songs were written about. This train depot that was in Clarksdale. So you have West Tennessee, where Tina's from. Number of musicians come out of West Tennessee, right? Cotton, rural, all this stuff. Clarksdale, Mississippi, similar. Ike Turner, very dapper and debonair man with the suits and all of that. Tina's father, dressed like that, right? Very clean cut, you know, put together man. All of these things. So she domineering. Her father was domineering. Now the difference is that Tina's mother was also quite a force to reckon with. But, Tina's father, a force to reckon with. So when she met Ike Turner, I think that she was meeting a man who was very culturally familiar to her, but he had something that many people in her world did not have, right? He had local, anyway, a regional, you might say, stardom. He was a regional star, but in other ways, so that's the only thing that differed. She did not know many, besides like Bootsy Whitelaw and all that. She did not know many like regional stars, right? Mahalia Jackson, that was later though. Mahalia Jackson, she came through West Tennessee. Um, she heard about Sister Rosetta Tharpe. I don't know if Sister Rosetta Tharpe ever went to West Tennessee, but she heard about her, and then like Bootsy Whitelaw and all that. So Mahalia Jackson is probably one of the biggest like national and international stars that Tina was aware of. but Ike, was this kind of regional name. So that was what
And
he had.
he was her vehicle. Let's not forget that. It's not like she wasn't ambitious, you know. I mean,
Yeah,
from being a nurse and black during the
yeah,
segregation and all of that, and a
yeah,
woman, I mean, she could
exactly.
suddenly be a star. So maybe she took more than she should have, of course, as a person. But he also changed her life, and that was a
Yeah.
kind of luxury that certainly she did not know, and a
And
stardom.
she loved it. I mean, as she always said, before they were ever in a relationship, they were very close. And she knew they would talk about, I mean, she said this, right? And Ike writes about this in his own memoir. Um, they talked on a deep level about their ambitions, their dreams, their wanting to break out of the, southern, East St. Louis world, and all of these things. They shared a lot. They shared a lot. And then I think the reason that a part of why she stayed for so long is, I think, we have to really remember, and what you brought up about her being a Black woman in the South, that's very important. And I think a lot of her fans don't. And I focus on that heavily in the first two chapters of the book, because Tina Turner's fans were a international, global. And a lot of those fans don't understand the specific social context that she comes out of, where there are not many options. First of all, in the 50s, 40s, 50s, early 60s, there are not many options for women, period, not just Black women. There are not many options for women. Then for Black women, even less, right? So, for example, when we talk about the like domestic violence, who is she going to go to? She leave Ike and go where and do what? No one was
And
going to
also,
help.
it apparently what we I've learned that it was a thing. I mean, it was not that uncommon that there was, well, domestic violence, and people knew of that, and even
Yeah,
in white families. But I
yeah,
guess we've heard that it was maybe more in black families. I don't know if that was the case, but it's probably about, what the social stature and culture, and how, where,
yes,
how people were on the economic ladder, really.
yes, yeah, as exactly. But their domestic violence was common in many homes across races, right, across classes. Um, so to leave, if you were to say, "Well, I'm leaving my husband because he is abusive," you wouldn't find any social support. You wouldn't find, there were no systems, there was no programs to help, nothing like that. And many of the people you knew were probably in similar situations. Um, so I say that to say that I think that when we discuss the Ike and Tina Turner's relationship from the personal side, there are a number of different things a number of different discourses coming together, right? You have codependency. They were in a codependent relationship. You have a power dynamic. He was older than her and always made her feel like, you wouldn't be anything without me. He was 8 years older than her. So she was in high school when he met her. He had barely ever gone to any kind of school. Um, so he often made her feel like, without me, you would be a nurse picking cotton in Nutbush, Tennessee.
And
Right?
I think he kept her thinking that way.
He
Whereas
did.
actually, after just a fool in love, and of course later on, he would be nothing without her, because she
Yeah,
was the breadwinner, and people came to see Tina. And what sold the records? It was Tina's voice on
exactly.
primarily his music. Later on, it was actually her songs more so
Exactly.
even. I mean, a lot of people don't even know how much Tina did there, and I think
Yes.
that's kind of unfair because a lot of people say, "Oh, well, he made her, and it was all because of her." And but of course, had she left in the early '60s, would she have become a big star herself on her own? That is, you.
I think she would have because they there was a lot like this is what Phil Spector did, right? He was a as a producer, he right, much like Ike, he found talent and made that talent a star, right? So Darlene Love, the great Darlene Love, right? Phil Spector had this huge hand in making her early in her career, the name that she was. And Ike, that's why Ike trademarked the name Tina Turner because he didn't want her to leave and somebody else produce her and take the name Tina Turner because
Yeah,
that
but
was
I
a
mean,
very
how can
real
you even
possibility.
think that in that way? I've thought about this several times. What he's, I'm gonna get me a new Tina. Well, good luck. Good luck. That ain't gonna happen, and it never
Yeah,
happened. And also, what happened later on? What I mean, when he did his later shows and he tried to do another group, he didn't reinvent himself. He didn't
yeah,
evolve. He was still playing their old music, his
correct,
old songs, the same repertoire.
correct.
With these, sorry to say, no offense, but rather tacky women trying to do the work of the ICATs, and then some woman, certainly a
Yeah,
wife, one of
yeah,
his countless, I think was married to 13 times, but one of his wives or so on, pretending to be a, let's just say, tame and not very talented version of Tina. Had
yeah,
he reinvented something new or had another type of woman out there, not to
yeah,
emulate Tina and be
yeah,
a down market version, it would
yeah,
probably he would have evolved, wouldn't he?
yeah. He would have evolved. The music business in the '60s was very much, especially for women, for vocalists like Tina Turner, right? There was a huge market, and not just for women. There were other acts like the Righteous Brothers, with their kind of the songs that they did with Phil Spector. There were many people out there like Phil Spector, Berry Gordy, the founder of Motown, um, who were looking for the next thing, like Berry Gordy with Diana Ross, right? Always looking for the next voice, the next talent to produce and have that hit song. And I don't know the extent to which Tina understood that in those years, but Ike certainly did, you know. And that's why when Phil Spector came along, he was aware of Phil Spector. He knew, right? Ike knew all of these people, right? Because he was in that world of producing and that was what he did before, like I said, before Tina. But when Phil Spector came along and was like, I want to produce Tina, I want Tina, you know, that put Ike on edge because that was what he feared. And it was intimated to me in my research that other people also tried to approach Ike and say, "Oh, can I produce Tina? Can I use Tina?" Right. So this was always a thing. So when Phil Spector came along, Ike, I think, was very on edge about it because this is what he was always trying to prevent, right? And it's sheer loyalty and psychological manipulation that made Tina not take advantage of those things. So I think that without Ike, she she'd have been a different kind of star. So her trajectory would not have been the same. But I think that what would have happened for Tina is what happened for Aretha Franklin in the 60s, Diana Ross in the 60s, you know, Darlene Love towards like the later 60s. The woman whose name is escaping me, Phil Spector's wife, Ronnie Spector,
Yeah.
and the
Yes.
Ronettes. I think something like that Tina would have been pulled in one of
Because
those
they
directions.
became stars on their own, these women, without
Yeah,
the husband or the, well, of course they had the impresario and these people
yeah,
behind them, but I mean,
exactly,
still they became stars on their own before she did, although she was
exactly,
known as this wild woman and unusual and
exactly.
totally different from all the
Yes,
other nice ladies standing there
yes,
singing with nice voices, huh?
exactly. She would have been a star, a star on her own, or a name known on her own earlier, without Ike. And I think you're absolutely right that Ike, right, he never evolved, and I think it makes perfect sense that the solo Grammy that he won in what was that, 2006, I think, when he for his album Rising with the Blues. I think
What
the
wasn't
reason
it
he,
actually in 2007, the same year he died?
yeah, it's for, so the 2007 ceremony is for the 2006 year, award year, right?
Right,
So
right,
so Tina
exactly.
won, when Tina won Record of the Year for What's Love Got to Do with It. That was in 1985 for a song that was from 1984, right? So the Grammys is always for the previous year, but
Right,
I think
right.
it makes perfect sense that he won that Grammy at that time, because that album was, it was a return to his roots, like the blues, but it actually wasn't a new formula. It was more, it wasn't trying to rehash the Ike and Tina thing. And as long as he tried to rehash the Ike and Tina thing, he wasn't successful. He, because that, it never evolved. It never moved beyond. And people could see through that. You go to see Ike Turner perform, and you see, as exactly as you say, you see this low budget Tina wannabe and these kind of dancers, and the whole thing is weird. But when he dropped that and brought back his original thing, he was successful. So where's
I got to see him on that last tour that he did in
mm,
2007, probably about 5 or 6 months only before he died. I'm so
mm,
happy that I really got to see the show and stand there first row. And of course, it was a smaller venue. So it was
mm,
kind of really up close. And it was so interesting to really see him there. And at that time, it was not one of his wives. It was um, Lyrica Garrett, who was a former Ikette and trained by
mm,
Tina, and her name in the 70s was, I think, Marcy Thomas or
mm,
something of that. She's in a lot of the old videos you see of Ike and
mm,
Tina in the 70s. So she had been around at that time and had a
mm,
very good voice, and of course was a version of Tina, but you could also kind of see that she was trained by Tina in a way. So
mm.
that made it a little bit more upmarket, I have to say. But I mean, it was really good to see him because it was down there. It was a blues club, and I really just enjoyed having the experience of seeing this
Yeah,
man that we've heard so much about, and
yeah,
also actually got to meet him. So that was kind of a full circle thing that I just managed
yeah.
to do that at the end.
And I think that that's one thing that people struggle with Tina Turner, is she wanted that for him, right? And that's a part of the reason she stayed with him for so long. She wanted him to be the star that he wanted to be. Um, they had very different aims and interests. She didn't want the party world. That's something that's consistent in all the everybody you hear about, everybody you meet who worked with Tina in some capacity, knew her in the Ike and Tina days and later. She she like she was a joyous person. She liked to have a good time, all that, but she was not a partier. She did not live the rock star party life. Ike did. He was not always that way. Right in the earlier years, they shared that too. He barely drank. He didn't do drugs. He was all about the show and all of that. And they shared that because she was a similarly determined, person who was all about the show, and they talked about music, and everything was about music and the charts and talking about the show, and once he started the drinking, the heavy drinking, the drugs, that they really, you're right. And her, I think, from her perspective, as she writes about it in her books and interview, he changed.
Well, he
And
was
they didn't,
also it was a different type of person. She was very
yeah,
sophisticated, very classy, and gravitated towards sophistication, fashion, the European lifestyle, and
mm,
or maybe more, say, the upper class American lifestyle as well. And he
mm,
was just not that kind of person. He was more street and gravitated
yeah,
towards more garish, trashy things. And that's what she also explained about their house, how he had it all, you know,
yeah,
how he decorated the house and everything
yeah,
around him was
yeah,
not classy.
yeah. They were in two different directions, but she
And
wanted,
do you think that was part of the reason why he took his anger out on Tina so much, because he actually feared her personality or whatever was inside, that spiritual side of her, that bright shining star, that strength that we also, well, that she clearly had then to survive this,
mm,
but also that we really saw later, which became the inspiration, that thing that you cannot pin down, that's beyond the hair
mm,
and her, whatever
mm,
she says, but that she was spiritually, let's say, on another level. It's not to say the
yeah,
sun's bad or worse or better, but it's just
yeah,
we are not always on the same wavelength, so to speak.
yes. I think you're right there. I think that they weren't on the same wavelength, and I mean, he took all his anger out on her because right originally they were that close. She was the repository even before they were in a relationship. She was the repository for all of his hopes and dreams. Even when they were friends, she would listen to his frustrations and the thing, how the people would leave him and he would get the song, do a song for them, and then they'd leave and they would have the success that he never had, blah, 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 blah. He told her all of his dreams for having a big name and all of these things he shared with her. And as things progressed, he continued to do that, but now violently, right? She was the repository for his anxieties, his fears, his hopes, his dreams. When things weren't going well on the charts, he took it out on her. When he had emotional issues, he took it out on her. Blah, blah, blah. So I think that a lot of that, I think some of it was because he saw her in a different realm from him, but I think another part of it is that she was always the repository for all of these problems. And then you also, again, the times, right? The coming out of the 50s, the 60s, coming out of a context where he didn't, value women. You don't, they, husband is controller, breadwinner, at least in name, controller. What husband says goes. You don't have to listen to him. And I think this is captured very well in I, Tina. In the interview in I, Tina with Bob Krasnow, when he says, him and Ike had this conversation, and Ike didn't understand women's liberation. He didn't understand that a woman could have wants and needs that were different from yours and that had to be honored and respected. He didn't get that. Like he genuinely did not. And Bob Krasnow says that he himself, talking about Bob Krasnow, that he was on this learning curve too. His wife left him. I think his wife's name was Nadia or Naja or something. His Bob Krasnow's wife left him because Bob Krasnow was like always on the road, living that rock and roll lifestyle, and she's like at home with the kids and just being ignored, and she left him. And so
Well,
Bob Krasnow,
Ike was a sex addict, obviously, and he wanted,
yeah,
to probably go to bed as many women as he could, without any
Mm-hmm.
consideration for Tina. And he had two, I mean, of course, he had Ann Thomas there, who was living
Mm-hmm.
with them as well, and being
Mm-hmm.
his steady mistress as well. And
Yeah.
even Rhonda Graham, the tour manager and later assistant for Tina and a close personal friend, she even also had to, succumb to whatever he wanted there sexually as well. And I guess that happened
Mm-hmm.
to all of them. I mean, it was
Yeah.
almost like if you were a woman and then you had to be with Ike. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, that would probably not happen today.
Yeah. Oh, it's a different time. It's a different time today, and that I think that also had a lot to do with it. That,
But
out of this milieu where you, I don't think in those years, I mean, I know in those years that culturally, Ike Turner and many men like him never learned to respect women, right? That wasn't a thing in that time. If you had that in your husband, that was great. That was very nice, but that was not the cultural ethos necessarily. Right. And Tina Turner, as I write in the book, though she did not see herself as participating in, women's liberation or anything like that, she's definitely coming to her own awakenings as a woman in her mid 30s at the same time women's liberation is happening, right?
and
The
also on the
late
stage
60s and
since the
70s.
60s, you had never seen a woman like that. She looked like
Yeah,
a liberated woman. She was the
yeah,
wildest woman. She was a wildcat and sexy, and in the skirts, it was a total revolution. They asked her to tone the whole thing down for television. And I mean, you had
yeah,
never seen a rock and roll singer, which basically what she always was,
yeah,
look or act and sing like that. So nobody
yeah,
could understand that she had been abused and beaten and all of that. I mean, maybe
yeah,
it would have been more likely to have happened to one of these nice girl singers, but she was almost like had that masculine force in a way also, right?
yeah. She was. She had that energy, and the way she would, I mean, as a song stylist, which she does not get as much credit for, she was an amazing song stylist, much like later Whitney Houston, where Whitney didn't write most of those songs. I don't, to my knowledge, she didn't write any songs. I don't know as much about Whitney Houston on that side, but to my knowledge, she didn't write any of those songs. But her ability to craft the song and interpret it and make choices about it. And you could see it even live. If you ever saw Whitney Houston live or watch it on YouTube or something, she she would in the moment make new choices about the song, take a song in new directions, different from the album. She would hold her breath differently here. She would go higher in the song than it does on the album, or go lower, or take the song in a different direction. Right. She was a genius song stylist, and so was Tina Turner. When she would take a song like the song Respect, Otis Redding's song Respect, that of course made famous by Aretha Franklin, but Tina also sung it, and many others sung it as well. Um, Songs like Ooh Padu, a kind of famous blues standard. Tina's version of Motherless Child, which Tina wrote her own version of it, but it's a folklore song, so many people have done versions of it. Her ability to take a song and make interpretive choices about that song, right? And just she would hit the stage in the whole phenomena of her, the look, the energy, the power, but then she takes the microphone and she starts singing and she starts interpreting a song and it just is this force, this phenomena. Um, and that was always throughout her career, right? So that she does not get enough credit for the depths of her artistry.
And she also
Um,
produced the best, simply the
yeah, she
best.
produced and Ask Me How I Feel. She produced the best. She produced Ask Me How I Feel on the and she also EP'd that album, right? Executive produced, which means overall having the overall creative vision. But then for the What's Love Got to Do with the soundtrack, she executive produced that album, right? So directed its creative vision, but also she co-produced most of the tracks on that album. Um, right. So her abilities were not just, she's known as this dynamic, amazing live performer, but she was also a genius song stylist. As I said, she wrote songs, she crafted shows, she crafted songs. She sat with Break Every Rule is that album is the story of her life. And it's the story of her life because she sat there with each of those songwriters and gave them the lines, right? The song Overnight Sensation is not just written about her. So she sat with Mark Knopfler and told him about the journey that the past, and how people would say about her when she had the big private dancer come back. People would say, oh, an overnight sensation. And she's like, I was in the juke joints. And, all through with the line in the song, all through the boy bands, rocking in the bandstands. She gave him those lines.
Well, in
That
her
was,
$2 high heel shoes.
yeah, in a honky tonk dress. You know, Mark Knopfler didn't use the words honky tonk. She used those words. So I say all that just to say that the world has a lot to learn about Tina Turner, right? The
That's very
depths.
important to
Yeah,
to mention that and to talk about
yeah,
that and to underline how much she actually did, obviously, and also
yeah.
as a musician and as a choreographer, not only of
Mm-hmm.
the dancing but also of the staging. She knew
Yes,
everything that everybody did, the dancing,
yes,
the musicians, what the
yes,
stage setting, and everything. And she could hear if one musician wasn't giving her a specific
yeah,
note.
yeah. In my research, I hope one day people get to see this footage. In my research, I was able to go to uh, some archives. Let's put it that way. In my research, I was able to go to some archives that have like a lot of rehearsal footage and stuff like that of Tina. And what's so interesting about that, and you get glimpses of it in like Behind the Dreams, the documentary, like there's rehearsal footage on YouTube. So the footage that I'm talking about it's not fundamentally different from that type of footage. It's just like more. It's just longer, and from more tours. And what's so wild is the way in which she would with her band and then with her dancers, but I'm talking specifically private dancer and Break Every Rule. So when the tours that had no dancers, she would direct each note and line that she wanted her musicians to play and sing. Because remember, on those tours, on all of her tours, but specifically Private Dancer through Wildest Dreams, really, the band was the backing. You know, the band sang the harmonies. They sang different. Tina always sang lead, obviously, but the band provided the backing vocals. So how do they know what parts to sing? She told them. How do they know how to harmonize with her? She taught them.
She did the whole thing, really. She
Yeah,
really staged that whole thing, and it was on
all
every
of it.
tour. And she became
And
very strict, and although everybody has said she was the most wonderful artist to work for, she was also a bit tough. And the
yeah,
band said that, the dancers said that. And not
yeah,
that she was like Ike, but now she was the one in control. Now she was the
yeah,
one telling everybody. And she had
yeah,
learned all of that from her years with Ike. And of course,
yeah,
also working with the Ikettes, obviously, and
yeah.
sketching them.
And her generation, right? Her whole generation was that way. James Brown, Ike Turner, Ray Charles, Little Richard's a different case, but Little Richard, or even Aretha Frank, all of these people, they all come out of that world, that 1960s Chitlin circuit, where you work hard and to a level of professionalism and standards that, it's almost unparalleled. They, how you control a band, how you work an audience, how you're constantly rehearsing. All of those people, not just the Ike and Tina Turner review, all of these artists, as they would travel from place to place on their tour buses, and they're rehearsing. You're not hanging out. You're rehearsing your harmonies. You're rehearsing, coming up with new
Constant
stuff.
work and hard work, right?
Constant work and hard work, and that carried through. I think the difference for Tina Turner from some of these other artists that we could name of her generation, again, that difference is that she didn't drink, she didn't do drugs, she didn't party like that. So her instrument, right, the instrument that was her voice, her body, it didn't break down over the years.
An interesting topic here. We talk about her living a clean life, no drinking, no alcohol, drugs, and all of these things. But of course, she really worked so hard, and that body worked for so many years. But
Mm-hmm.
in the last 10 years, she died this year, 2023. But since
Mm-hmm.
2013, when she married Irvin, she
Mm-hmm.
actually had all these terrible illnesses.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even mentioned in the documentary. They totally, I guess it was Tina's choice not even to mention that her last 10 years there was a lot of misery, even though she talks about being serene and a beautiful place. But it really
Mm-hmm.
was very, very, very tough on her. And on top of having a stroke and a kidney failure and a kidney transplant and colon
Mm-hmm.
cancer, both of her own sons, died as well.
Mm-hmm.
Rhonda Graham, her best friend and assistant, died, and John Miles died. A lot of people that she knew
Yeah.
died, and she was practically rather secluded there with Irvin in Switzerland for a long time, actually. And my thing about that is that Tina never really went through therapy. She never had therapy in her life after going through all of that with Ike and all of the abuse and the beating. She just went on and was strong and had to come back and was the survivor and the poster girl for
Mm-hmm.
being strong and triumphant
Mm-hmm.
after having survived all of that. And she was beautiful and did all the tours. But then after that final tour in 2008 and 2009 and a few
Mm-hmm.
years after, it was almost like her body broke down. And what we do know, and I guess this will come into the discussion of Buddhism and her faith as well,
Mm-hmm.
which is how she survived, practicing that. But if you don't go through therapy and you don't really go into that darkness that you've been through, and we heard from the documentary and Irvin saying that she still had nightmares about Ike and was basically PTSD. So that the body has body memory,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of things that you don't work through therapy to get all that out can actually sit and manifest, be
Mm-hmm.
layered in your body. And
Mm-hmm.
that is my thing. Could that be because she never really totally uh, looked at it and went through that darkness, but
Mm-hmm.
wanted to go away from it, but used Buddhism to survive, to go in that direction, not looking to the past. She did not like to talk about the
Mm-hmm.
past or go to that place because it brought back the memories. It was a long thing. I did a
Yeah,
long rant here, but I think you get my
I get what you mean.
yeah.
Yeah. And there is a book about this kind of stuff called that everybody is into called The Body Keeps Score. So it's a very interesting book. But well, the first thing I want to say is that she actually did do a lot of processing. The dreams that she had that Irvin brought up in the documentary, right? those dreams came when people would bring it up to her, so it was not that she was just at home and chilling with Irvin and then suddenly would have these dreams. It was always around, because which is why towards the end she stopped doing interviews at all. Right. And for the documentary, for the HBO documentary, Dan Lindsay and TJ Martin, right, they said they had very limited time with her. Very limited because she didn't want to. She didn't want to sit around and have the same conversations that she had been having for the entirety of her solo career, right? And you can see in the documentary, right, when Roger was talking about they were having the success, private dancer, and all that, and he starts pounding his head. He's like, people kept bringing it up, and it really bothered them, and it really bothered her because she said, as she said in that interview, the kind of one everybody's been really into from the Break Every Rule period, when Tina said, nobody said shit about Ike Turner's music until she became successful. That really bothered her and Roger and all of them, because it is true that people barely bought rather any of that Ike and Tina music, right? Ike and Tina were never had major chart success. They did a couple of times. A Fool in Love, It's Gonna Work Out Fine, River Deep Mountain High in Europe. Proud Mary was obviously a big hit for them. Nutbush City Limits, big hit for them. Couple songs here and there, and then there are different charts, right? So there's the R&B, Billboard R&B chart. There was the variety music charts. There was the soul. So there are different charts that they did well. A lot of people always talk about the Billboard Hot 100 and the Billboard 200, and those are like the biggest charts in the business. So while they didn't always do well on those charts, they did do very well on some other charts. But they never had like that major hit. It wasn't Motown, it wasn't like every song turned to gold platinum.
And that
When
was
she
why they
became,
sadly never performed too many of their own songs, which I
yeah,
truly regret and wish they
yeah,
had done instead of all those cover numbers, which were good
yeah,
too. But I mean, it was like people came to see them, always sold out. And that's the same with Tina's career, even though she was a
yeah,
box office uh, or recording artist. But I mean, people
yeah,
came to see her. But
exactly.
yeah.
But they, so then she became successful solo artist. And suddenly everybody wants to talk about Ike, 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 and Ike and Tina's music and that. And that was really upsetting for her, because leaving aside the abuse and all of that, it was like the same thing happening again. And the Ike and Tina, I didn't get the credit back there. People thought like Ike made me and produced me, even though I was writing all these songs. And now here again, I'm this
But a
solo
whole new
artist.
generation like me, and I do think yourself as well, and many
Yeah,
we know, only got to know about Ike and Tina because of Tina's success. And
exactly.
then we went back to buy the old records in those
Yes,
old record stores and all
yes,
these places. And I mean,
yeah,
and people became interested. The movie would never have happened had she not
yes,
become a star. And her legend,
exactly.
the myth about Tina was that she went through all of that.
Exactly. And that was when the dreams would come for her.
Had she really deeply been looking at it, not just chanting and not just moving forward and wanting things, which you certainly got through chanting, which in my opinion is the same as law of attraction, focusing on something you really want. And you can explain more about that. But I mean, it's more like, had she really gone into that and through that therapy and not wanting to talk about it, maybe it would not have been so like not have been re-traumatizing her every time it was brought up.
Well, we have to remember that Tina had a very extensive network that she made use of. So while I don't think, but I don't know that she ever went through like some kind of formal therapy program, but she did. Right, her first of all, the wellness coaches on her various tours were many of them, had these other specialties as well. She did a lot of work with her psychics and past life regressors, and many of them who were trained in psychology and other kinds of things. So she did it her way. Of course, we will never know privately what all she was doing. I mean, that will just never be known. But we do know that she did do a lot of work to address in her own way these things. And I think it was more about the way things were brought up, not not that they were brought up at all, but the way in which it would come up. Like she would be having a different conversation, talking about her life or her solo career or whatever. And then someone would just say, and the documentary captures that very well, the HBO documentary. The questions that people would ask her, first of all, would never be asked today in interviews. People would just ask her, what's the worst thing Ike Turner ever did to you? Remember that time he punched you in the face? Remember that time he did this to you? Tina, tell us about the time he threw you down the stairs. Tell us about the time he threw hot coffee in your face. Those are not appropriate questions to ask somebody, anybody. And there's a certain we don't talk to our family members that way. We don't ask our friends questions like that. You don't go up to your friend and say, "So, friend, tell me how your husband punched you in the face." We don't do that, right? And we don't even do it now to celebrities. That's not the way
Well, we
celebrities
don't
get
know very
interviewed
many
anymore.
celebrities who's been through what went through, and even when they
Yeah.
were kinder in their way of formulating a question that was probing like that,
Mhm.
it also was not doing anything very good for her, certainly, and it was a
Yeah.
lot, and it was too much focus on it, and she wanted to get away from it. What do you think?
Yeah.
Do you think there's another explanation to why she went through that
The
much
illnesses.
last 10
Well,
years? Because certainly that body that had always just been, well, what a body who did everything on the
yeah.
stage. And, suddenly she could have been here still. She could have been here
Yeah.
in her 90s with that workout and health and looking
Yeah.
great and all of that. But suddenly, when the body goes through that much, you cannot withstand it
Yeah.
and hold on much longer, can you?
Well, she worked for many years with I think the biggest problem for Tina, cancer, I think the cancer is not a big deal because for many people as they get older, her son was younger. I mean, her son died of cancer, her youngest son, Ronnie, right? He died of cancer in his 60s. So for, the longer and longer people live and a lot of factors influence cancer. So that I don't think, that wasn't the biggest issue she went through by far. And that just happens. Her big problem, Tina Turner's big problem was a lifetime of high blood pressure. That's the source of that caused her stroke, that caused, as it does for many people, especially many African Americans, right? It caused her stroke. It caused her kidney failure. It caused her to have kidney disease. That's what happens when you have high blood pressure for that many years. It takes
And
its
she did
very
not
heavy toll.
receive medication for it because she didn't think that she needed that. She said, "Yeah, I'm always working high level energy
Yeah.
at a
Well, she did
high
take
pace."
medication throughout her career for it, but it was never, as it progressed, as she got older, she should have been taking more. And that much is clear.
And
And
also, she
that's
didn't
what,
know that high blood pressure was connected to the kidneys.
yeah, the kidneys, the heart, right? The kidneys and the heart, there's a name for it. I just can't, the name is not coming to me right now, of the kind of, um, when two organs in the body have this relationship, there's a name for it. I just can't think of it right now. My mother is a nurse, which is how I know a lot of this stuff. But anyway, Tina, that's what killed Tina, right? Years of high blood pressure. It caused, and many of the problems that she had in the last 10 years, almost all of them except cancer, were a direct result of high blood pressure. The stroke, her biggest problems, right? The stroke and her kidneys. Those are the direct result of high blood pressure. And once somebody goes on dialysis, unfortunately, as I know from members of my own family and from the fact that my mother's a nurse, once a person goes on dialysis, their life expectancy decreases dramatically. And Tina was on dialysis for a long time. She actually lived longer than many people who go on dialysis. And that's a testament to the kidney she got from her husband, also her own kind of willpower, and being in a country that has one of the best healthcare systems in the world. Um, if she had been in the
And
United
she could
States,
obviously afford special treatment and had the
yeah,
special place that they cleared for her in the hospital and all of that. So
exactly,
she would not be recognized, and for years nobody knew what she was actually going through.
exactly. Which is just the craziest thing, for the amount of illnesses that she went through that no one knew about until
Well,
there were
you could
rumors over
tell
the
a lot of
years.
the fans did not like when either I or somebody who did have the courage to say it how it was. You could easily tell that she had the stroke. She
Yeah,
was it was difficult for her to speak. She looked different, the whole side of
yeah,
her face, and
yeah,
every time somebody brought it up, they would try to, people don't want to see the truth.
yeah, exactly. But so there were hints and there were clues, and but no one, but
Knew the
once,
extent and how much,
yeah.
obviously. No.
I mean, I was one of those people who, when I read in the lead up to my love story, which came out in 2018, it was clear to me, right? Because I have this family that has this medical background, and I am African American in the United States. I know the kinds of things I'm looking at. So when I was looking at Tina Turner, I could tell something had happened. I could tell that she had had a stroke. I could tell that the way her body was changing was clearly a result of something going on. But I,
First she gained a lot of weight, and then at some point, and she even had gained a lot of weight for that last tour, by the way. But I mean, she gained a lot of weight, and then suddenly she totally became way too skinny. I think around 2016, we saw some very frail images and videos from her receiving an award in Holland and going to a fashion thing in Milan and things like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I knew something, but I didn't know the extent. And I always thought to myself, come on, T, you could do a performance. You could, put out an album, something. It doesn't have to be a big tour. And so I was one of those people that was like, why are you not doing anything? And it was actually a woman who knew Tina back in the early days of her Buddhist practice. And I interviewed this woman over many times over the years, and then for the book. And she was the one who told me, because I brought this up. I had said, so now we're talking about around 2015 or 16. And I was having this conversation it was 2016. I was having this conversation with this woman. And I said, this is absurd that, she won't put out anything and won't perform, won't appear, won't put out anything. Like, this is absurd. And the woman said to me, she said, I know Anna, because they used to call her, I know Tina. And she said, if Tina's not doing anything, there must be something seriously wrong. She said, because that woman is one of the most creative, kinetic people that I know. She never keeps still. She always has to be working on something, whether that's the house, whether that's an album, a show. Like, she cannot sit long before she needs to do something. So if she's not doing something, something must be gravely wrong. And I said at that time, I said, well, but we don't know that. And then when I read the excerpts of my love story that came out, I was like, oh my God, you know, that's just this litany of problems.
It
Um,
was extraordinary, and I think we all felt the same. And we were hoping so much that she would do something, and that was what
yeah,
we were used to. But it was almost
yeah,
like that interview she did on her honeymoon in
mhm,
2013 with Oprah after her wedding to Irvin, where we didn't know that she had actually felt that stroke coming on in a mild way, or she was dizzy or whatever. I mean, it was
mhm,
almost prophetic in a way, that interview saying, this is the end, will not happen again, blah, blah, blah. And almost
yeah,
like a full circle, almost as if she knew, and obviously she didn't. But I mean, it was like that was 10, exactly 10 years, um, well, before she died. And that was when all of those things started.
yeah. So I think that the biggest culprit in all of that was the high blood pressure, right? I think that if it weren't for that, she would still be with us because the cancer they took care of, obviously, vertigo doesn't kill you. So, and they took care of the vertigo, but it doesn't kill you generally. So the vertigo is, it sucked, but it's okay.
But is it not true, Ralph? And I'm sure you might agree with me that that there are two ways of looking at illnesses and the world. There is a medical way and a political way, but there is also a
Mm-hmm.
spiritual way. And
Mm-hmm.
also, we do know that the psyche affects the body, and there are reasons. I mean, why would, like Louise Hay, I'm sure you know about
Mm-hmm.
her, who wrote
Yeah.
"Heal Your Life." She always said, and a lot of those people say that every illness is caused by something in your psyche or trauma, or because of something specific in your life that you can change and that you can heal yourself even without medicine. If you are a strong believer, or you really use manifestation, law of attraction, or really know how to
Mm-hmm.
use whatever your body can do, and know that if you know how the body can heal itself, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I definitely agree with you there that there is always to every aspect of our life, be it illness or otherwise, all right, there's a the kind of physical component and a spiritual component. It is also true that, I mean, everybody's going to get sick at some point, you know, and nobody's getting out of here alive. So even if you could do all the manifestation you want, and all the therapy you want, and all the exercising you want, and all of the macrobiotic diet you want to have, but eventually you're not getting out of this world
That's one
alive.
thing we're certain of, unfortunately. And
Exactly. So Nichiren has, Tina Turner was a Nichiren Buddhist, and she was very fond of the following passage um, that comes out of Nichiren's writings. Nichiren says, "Could not this illness of your husband's be?" So he's writing to one of his followers, and he says, "Could not this illness of your husband's be the Buddha's design? Because two sutras both teach that sick people will surely attain Buddhahood. Illness gives rise to resolve to attain the way." So she viewed her illnesses in a spiritual context, that that though you are ill and illness is a part of life, you can still have joy and quality of life and do your best. And she fought hard. I mean, not just Irvin. Of course, Irvin fought really hard to keep her alive. Um, but Tina herself, she went through the therapies, she took the treatments, she had the transplant, she every new thing that she or Irvin would come up with, she would try. Um, so I do think it is the case that she did her best with it, but that high blood pressure is a silent. It's in the United States. It's often called one of the number one silent killers. You know that
and
it.
she stayed here for as long as she could, or some people suspect maybe as long as she wanted to. But
Yeah.
that is also an interesting discussion. Can you please tell the audience a little bit about Buddhism, and what is the difference between the Japanese practice of Buddhism and the Tibet one, the original
Mhm.
way of practicing Buddhism, the Dalai Lama way that we probably know more with the Buddha figures like the one I have here. And
Mhm.
I mean, what is it? Why is there even this difference? It's
Yeah.
quite different, isn't it?
So Buddhism arose originally, of course, in what is today India, some 2,500 to 3,000 years ago. And as it spread throughout Asia, right, and then the world, of course, it developed and changed all along the way. So Mahayana Buddhism, which is what's often called Mahayana Buddhism, spread essentially north through North India into Central Asia and into East Asia. That's the Mahayana Buddhist tradition. And so the form of Buddhism that Tina Turner practiced, Soka Gakkai Nichiren Buddhism, which is a Nichiren Buddhist tradition that was founded. Nichiren Buddhism came about in the 13th century in Japan by a 13th century monk named Nichiren Daishonin, who lived from 1222 to 1282. Um, and so that's a Mahayana Buddhist lineage, right? So the tree of Soka Gakkai Nichiren Buddhism is Soka Gakkai, which is a Nichiren Buddhist lineage. Nichiren Buddhism comes from the 13th century. Nichiren was a Tendai monk from a school of Buddhism called the Tendai School, which was established in Japan around the 8th and 9th century. And that tradition comes from a Chinese tradition that was established in basically the 5th and 6th century in China. And those traditions had come to China around the 1st and 2nd century. So it has this long history, but of course, over the centuries, the millennia, it grows and changes. So the distinctive teaching of Nichiren Buddhism is that most Buddhists believe that if you do your practice, whatever that practice may be, whether that's silent meditation, chanting, scriptural copying, all of these kinds of things, visualization, that you will progress along the Buddhist path, right? All Buddhist traditions believe that. But where Nichiren is unique is that he centered all of his teachings on one particular sutra, the Lotus Sutra. And he taught that it was the Lotus Sutra alone that represented the highest teachings of the Buddha. And that by chanting the title of the Lotus Sutra in the form of the mantra, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, by chanting the title of that sutra, you could manifest all of the teachings of the sutra just by chanting its title and select chapters of the text. So his tradition, the Nichiren tradition, focuses on chanting the title of the Lotus Sutra and chapters of the Lotus Sutra. Soka Gakkai, the Buddhist tradition to which Tina belonged, was founded in 1930. Actually, November 18th, 1930 is the founding date of Soka Gakkai. And that tradition took Nichiren's teachings and globalized those teachings and spread those teachings around the world through propagation, right? So most people don't associate Buddhism with like propagation, with actively trying to spread the teaching. But this particular Buddhist tradition, Soka Gakkai, does focus on propagation of the teaching. And that's how they have attracted this kind of diverse group of followers, a diverse group of members and practitioners. And Tina Turner's sons was one of those, right? Her son Roddy Turner. Tina Turner's friends, Herbie Hancock and Wayne Shorter, right? Also converted to the practice through this kind of proselytization process, and Tina herself. And when Tina talks about her practice in interviews, as I write about in the book, when she talks about her practice, she is actually participating in the Soka Gakkai Nichiren Buddhist practice of propagating the teachings. So Tina used every opportunity, her books, interviews, her movies, right? She used every opportunity to share the practice with others.
And the
And that
musical. And the
and the
musical too.
musical and the musical, right? The documentary. She all of those are basically SGI practices, right? SGI members do all that they can to propagate and spread those teachings. So I think if anything makes that form of Buddhism unique, it's focused on propagation, spreading the teachings,
Yeah, but
actively
isn't that
spreading the
isn't that the
teachings.
same thing for all religions and Jehovah's Witnesses and
Yeah.
Scientology and cults? I mean, isn't that why that religion or that philosophy actually has been seen by a lot of people as some kind of hocus pocus pocus kind of thing, where it's more in the
Yeah.
occult, where I think a lot of people say this is not really a religion, but more a philosophy, right?
Yeah. Some people say that. Yeah. It is, but it is. I mean, it is, but it is a religion. I mean, Buddhism is a religion,
Yes.
and it's a quite an old one. Um, but yes, it is true that many people have said that it's like a very different form of Buddhism, or it's like not, it's kind of magical thinking or something like that.
But we don't
But
see those Buddhists go door to door. I mean, I guess they did. I mean, I guess they have done that, like Avon
they did,
or Jehovah's Witnesses and all these. But I
yeah,
mean, this is not exactly, they're not being welcomed by a lot of people. Those people who go door to door. I mean, it's
yeah,
quite annoying, isn't it?
yes. SGI Soka Gakkai in its early history, in particularly in the United States, it did it did do this door to door practice. It does not do that anymore, and it stopped doing that around the early to mid 70s. But they did do that at one point in their history in the United States, not in other parts of the world.
So tell me, the Japanese Nichiren, am I saying it right?
Nichiren, mhm.
Nichiren Buddhist focus point or spot or place and symbol of worship is a little cupboard, right, named the Gohonzon.
Yeah,
You open it when it's time to pray or to chant, rather,
mhm,
in Buddhist terms, chanting, obviously, and then you begin Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. And when that is done, you
mhm,
close the Gohonzon so that it's
mhm.
not open all the time, as far as I know. This is a kind of altar in the same way that you also see in the Christian faith and whatever, but it's very specific to that way of practicing, that Japanese Buddhist way. But why is there any need for that Gohonzon, that focus point, and to sit and
That's a good
look
question.
into that, whatever it is you look at?
That's a very good question. First of all, the cabinet is called a Butsudan, and the Gohonzon is the scroll that goes in the cabinet. Yeah,
The Butsudan and then the Gohonzon is the scroll.
the scroll. Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah.
exactly. So the why you need the Gohonzon, or according to Nichiren Buddhist practice and Soka Gakkai Nichiren Buddhist practice, the Gohonzon represents on it the enlightened nature of life, right? The true nature of life. So on the Gohonzon, the scroll, down the center of the scroll, it says Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. And then in the sides of the scroll, like the other logographs on the scroll, represent the different Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and other kinds of awakened beings throughout the Buddhist cosmos. But they're all facing Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, which is, according to that tradition, the true nature of life and the name of your Buddhahood, your highest potential. So you have the Gohonzon and you chant facing the Gohonzon because it helps you to bring out the enlightened nature of your own life, because it is the depiction of the true nature of your life. And that's what they believe in the Soka Gakkai Nichiren Buddhist tradition. And that's why they have this Gohonzon and chant to it. Yeah.
And what does it take, in your view, to become enlightened? I mean, I guess the name of the Buddha means the enlightened one, right?
Yeah, Buddha
I mean,
means enlightened one.
the enlightened one, and that's the name of the Buddha in English. But what does it take to really become enlightened and, well, highly spiritual? That's more than just practicing something. A lot of people are religious because they're brought up that way, but they act really bad, you know? So it's not, I mean, it's not like they're very spiritual. Let's just say it like that. Anybody can call themselves religious, and they do that in
Yeah.
all kinds of branches and whatever religion you can belong to. Just see the wars going on in the world,
hmm
right? So, I
Yeah.
mean, what does it, in your view, and I guess Tina talked about this also, take to be in really enlightened? Can we even reach that state, you and I, or other people who
Yes.
practice this?
According to Soka Gakkai Nichiren Buddhist teaching, yes. Because the according to Soka Gakkai Nichiren Buddhist teaching, you're already you already have inside of yourself the potential to become awakened, right? So Buddha means awakened one. So awakened from a state of spiritual sleep is what the metaphor is. So we each, according to this form of Buddhism, we each have that potential inside of ourselves, right? Every single one of us. And by chanting, we activate that potential, we bring it out. Um, so it is true that in many religious traditions, Buddhism included, there are people who don't act the part. That is definitely
Boy, have
true.
we seen that a lot.
So,
Yeah, we've certainly
um,
seen that a lot, haven't we?
yes, there are people who don't act the part. But to reach or to attain or to reveal in Nichiren Buddhism, to reveal one's Buddhahood, one's awakened potential, requires engaging in practice and study, right, to develop oneself, to evolve oneself, and that process is never ending. So you might say, according to Soka Gakkai Nichiren Buddhist, awakening or enlightenment is not a goal and a destination, but rather a process and a journey, right? And this is what Tina Turner is referencing when she was always talking about evolving, evolution, you know, seeking to better herself and to always become better and better and better. That is the Soka Gakkai Nichiren Buddhist understanding of Buddhahood and awakening.
What
It's this
does
continuous
chanting,
process.
specifically chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo and all of those words that go on, and you really have
Mm-hmm.
to study them to learn them, right? And
Yeah.
it's kind of complicated, but very fascinating. But
Mm-hmm.
what does chanting and the sound do? We also know about sound healing. We know that frequencies and energy and all that are extremely important and can heal or make you feel in a certain way. How does
Mm-hmm.
that work when you put your intention to want something or to better yourself or desire or whatever? Santina was a materialist. We know that she said that herself.
Mm-hmm.
For a long time, she was a materialist. And, you know, you can also get things supposedly by chanting this. But what does that is it like a mindfulness kind of practice using the law of attraction when you chant those words along with the sound and the rhythm?
So the Buddhist teaching is cause and effect, right? That's like the fundamental teaching in Buddhism is that life is cause and effect. So to see certain kinds of effects, you have to create certain kinds of causes. And Nichiren taught that the ultimate cause is chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, right? The title of the Lotus Sutra in mantric form and the name of your Buddha nature. That's the ultimate cause that can produce every effect that you want to see, right? Regardless of how mundane or spiritual those effects may be. So when you chant to get something, so to speak, album success, major tours, or a job, or a car, whatever people chant for, the belief underlying that is that by chanting, you are making the ultimate cause to get the effects that you want to see. And intention plays a huge role in that because in Buddhist psychology, right, intentional action is the key, right? There's a Sanskrit word, chaitana, which means intention, intentionality, will, all of these things. And that's a significant part of almost all Buddhist traditions, right? This belief in intentional action, right? Intentional causes to create intentional effects. So that's what chanting is thought to do in that tradition, right?
And Tina certainly it's felt that it worked for her. It gave her the
Yes.
strength to leave Ike. It gave her the strength to go on, even though she was kind of working from nothing again in poverty, and
Hmm.
then becoming the star, wanting the comeback, wanting to play the stadiums, be the first not just black female singer, but the first female singer in history to pack a stadium, and to, of course, reach that level of success and the legendary status that she has now. And
Hmm.
she does say that Buddhism led her on that entire path, and so it certainly worked for her and for many other people. What about you then? You have been studying all of this and are really deeply into it and do lectures about it as well. But I
Hmm.
mean, what came first? You being a Tina fan and then becoming a Buddhist, or did you become a Buddhist first and then discovering Tina through all of that?
They grew really in tandem. They so one didn't come before the other, basically. They Tina and Buddhism and the other things that I studied came in a process of learning and discovery about a lot of different things. Um, the but it is true that the really the practice of Buddhism for me came before Tina.
Before Tina, that's interesting. A lot of
Yeah,
fans devote themselves to that faith because of Tina.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I went a bit the other way, but yeah. But I'm very much inspired by, as are many people, of course. I'm very much inspired by, which is why I wrote the book. I'm very much inspired by her religious journeys and those of her friends, like now the late Wayne Shorter, Herbie Hancock, those like that. I think that it's a very powerful practice, a very powerful tradition, and the philosophy is quite profound. Um, and yes, it clearly worked. It clearly worked for her, um, as it does for many people around the world. Um, right, the organization that she belonged to was a global organization. Right, it was in 192 countries, some 11 or 12 million people around the world. So it's a big thing, you know. It's a big in Japan, of course. Um, and it's a beautiful tradition. It's a beautiful tradition. I mean, I have, you may see, I have actually two altars in my home. One behind me, that's what that black cabinet is.
Oh,
Um, and then I also have another one in the living room. Actually, the one in the living room is similar to Tina's.
are
Um,
you in California now?
I'm in California right now.
In
Mhm.
Los Angeles or
I am in San Francisco right now.
in San Francisco? Right.
Yeah,
It's in the north. That's also
yeah,
beautiful up there. Yeah, definitely.
NorCal.
So, I mean, recently you attended and you spoke
Mhm.
at this family memorial for Tina Turner in California as well, initiated by her family members. And we didn't, of course, see anything or hear anything about a funeral service, memorial, or anything for Tina. We were left with practically nothing when she died. We heard nothing about Irvin and what's going on with anything. So we're
Yeah.
still kind of really hoping for some kind of closure, which I think we do deserve, even though
Mhm.
that part of the the Tina, let's say, Urban's world there with Tina, that they want to keep things privately. But I do think that a lot of people that were devoted to Tina for so many years, she meant so much to the world that we need some kind of a closure, and we have heard
Mhm.
nothing. But then there was this family memorial by her family members. You spoke there, you attended it. Why were you invited? What happened? Tell us about what went on there.
Mhm. Yeah, so the memorial service was an SGI Buddhist memorial service that was organized primarily by Tina's niece, and it was beautiful. That I gave the eulogy. Others spoke as well. Members of Tina's family spoke. The final words, the closing words, were given by the woman who was actually leading the first Buddhist meeting Tina ever attended, and a woman who Tina was very close to in the early days of her Buddhist practice. There was a slideshow done by, with music and everything, done by uh, Ken Oglesby. There was an incense offering, which is a traditional Buddhist memorial service practice of each attendee going up and offering incense for the life of the deceased person. So it was quite beautiful. It was profound, and I think that you're right that there needs to be more done to befit the fact that she was a global icon that meant so much to so many people. And it was just over, right? She passed away May 24th, or it was announced on May 24th, and then nothing,
And we don't even
nothing.
know if that was that actually the exact day.
Yeah. So,
We actually
nothing
don't
from
know, and
there.
there's a lot of speculation about whether or not that it had actually happened before, and it was announced on that day because nobody saw things leaving or whatever at the gates. But and and there's a little bit of a mystery
Yeah.
around that whole thing there, right?
Yeah. 100%. And so there should be more done. I absolutely agree. When somebody like that passes away, I think what most of her peers did was, they usually had two or three services, right? So if you think of Aretha Franklin or Whitney Houston again,
Or
um,
Michael Jackson.
or Michael Jackson, there was a private family service, and then there was a kind of big public memorial. And
Yeah, and we
Aretha
knew
Franklin is,
about,
is
and people knew about both. There
and
were
people knew
even
about
thing. I mean,
both.
there was a lot. There were reports about that private thing as well. There's nothing here. It's almost
Yeah.
like is as if the press made some kind of a deal, which is unusual with the estate or whatever, because normally they would be hunting them down, even if it's disrespectful and all that. But it's remarkable how silent
Yeah.
everything has been, right? Even for the
Yeah.
family and people around, who kind of knew her and,
Yeah.
was as close to her as you could be, even, which was not too
Yeah.
close.
Yes. 100%. That there needs to be more done. And it is a shame. But that mirrors actually a lot of Tina Turner's especially later career. It mirrors that, right? There should be more done with her catalog. There should be more done with her live performances. There should be more done with, for her death. A lot of it's a real mystery. I have a theory about why this is, though.
I have a
And
theory too, but I would love to hear yours first.
my theory, and this is going back to when Tina Turner was alive, is that, her career really developed and ended, or, retirement, before the importance of social media, right? I mean, that's just a fact. So in her era, and she remained this way. You hit it hard for a year or two, and then silenced for a couple of years, and then you come back and hit it hard, and then you're silent again, right? But in the social media age, right? Which really doesn't start until, if you think, well, there was MySpace before that, but if you think of Facebook in 2004, 5, 6, but it didn't become important, especially like for artists and public figures. The importance of something like Facebook is later. We're talking about like post 2009. YouTube is also around this time, but still in the early days of YouTube, not great. And then, obviously before, there's all before Instagram and all this other stuff. So her career never took place in that era where you use social media, right? You really use it. And this remains true for her team. They don't do social media very well
They
at
don't
all.
do it very well, but they announced her death on social media, and that was how the
Yeah.
press became aware of it, and then the world. But I
Yeah.
mean, so still something could be done about it. I mean, even though she was not from
Yeah.
that era, that's not an explanation, I feel, because,
Yeah.
look at all the other older stars that
Yeah.
die and what is happening there. This is Tina. She's beyond a lot of most of them actually, and above.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't really get the queen of rock and roll.
Yeah. I agree. I agree that they don't, they should do more. They
Mm.
should do more. I don't know why they don't do more, but, and with her death, it does leave and has left many people in a deep emotional place
Yeah.
because the story just ended and there was nothing further. So the family's memorial service was for them to deal with that. I don't know. I have no information about, and I have no knowledge of whether there will ever be something big and public. There should be, but I don't know if there ever will be. I I personally doubt that that will ever be the case, but I don't know, and I certainly hope that I'm wrong in that. I deeply hope that I'm wrong on that front, but I suspect that there never will be anything bigger done, big in public done. I am not impressed with most of the tributes that I have seen.
Oh, you mean you
Um,
didn't love the Patti LaBelle one?
Yeah, I'm not impressed with a lot of what I've seen. Certainly haven't seen anything that befits who she was.
The only one I really saw that was amazing was Anastasia. Was a great
Mhm.
singer who sang simply the best, but she was around a lot of Schlager performers in Germany singing that's folk musicians in Germany. So it was a different thing, but still in Europe again, that a
Yeah,
little bit more was done. But to imagine that America didn't do more, her home country, and that whole
yeah.
Patti LaBelle
I
thing.
mean, the last time she was ever in the United States publicly
Yeah.
was that the Broadway musical, and basically people, it is functionally like people never saw her again. For many people,
No one
there
did.
was there. Yeah, I
None of
mean,
us did
basically,
except for a picture or something, but
yeah,
that was all. That's it.
yeah, and that's difficult. That basically means what, five? That was 5 years ago, 5 years ago.
19.
Yeah, 2019. That basically means people saw her, and then that one time, and then the next thing they knew, she was gone. So that is a difficult thing. It's a difficult
Well, the
thing.
strange and also kind of an emotional thing to think about, and I felt that at the time also that the documentary 2 years ago not only did they say it was a closure, but it really was. It was like her saying goodbye, truly.
Yes, yes. I think so. I think so. I mean, I get whenever I watch the documentary, and I've shown it in classes. I've use it in my work. But the end montage, the kind of final month, is very very profound, very deep, very profound. They did a beautiful job with showing the journey and her last, right, her her end. as a public figure, right? That's what that montage really was. You know,
Really was. It
yeah,
really a very extraordinary and powerful
yeah,
moment, and they did a very great job with it. And it almost felt like Tina knew, and also she had, years before that, when she was really ill, she had decided on possibly doing the exit possibility, which is what it's
mm,
called in Switzerland when you can actually
yeah,
do organized or arranged suicide.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
there's also a bit of speculation on whether she actually did that this time because it was not, she could not live without that dialysis machine or whatever. But I mean, even if she did that, there should still be, well, they didn't have to talk about that actually. There should still be the memorial and on all of that, no matter how, if it was natural or because of all of those illnesses, or if she actually chose to say goodbye, this it's
mm,
not worth it anymore.
yeah. I agree. I agree. There should be more, and I wish I had more information about that, which I don't.
But your
Um,
book, to in our remaining moments here, Ralph,
mhm,
and also to you have to tell people how they can purchase the book and order the
mhm,
book around the world, but also, in closing here, you've written this book and it's wonderful. It's another aspect of Tina's
mhm,
life. A lot of people didn't focus on that. Yes, do hold
mhm.
up. No, do hold up the book a little bit longer.
Yes. Well, this is my book. You can order it on from Amazon, from Barnes and Noble or local sites. It's called Dancing in My Dreams, a spiritual biography of Tina Turner. And I think that the book makes a great contribution for both the general public, the specialized reader, the kind of scholar of religion, those who are interested in religion and popular culture, those who are interested in music history, and also, of course, fans. I think will learn a lot from the book. It's well researched, as I do say so myself. It has a number of footnotes, or really they're end notes, but a number of end notes for every chapter showing where I'm drawing my information from and some information that's not in the main body of the book, but is important nonetheless. There are lots of little gems. I put in some little gems for fans, um,
And
that
it's
I think
quite a
that
big
they
book
will enjoy.
also. I mean, it's not just
Yeah,
like a pamphlet, is it?
no, it's a big book, and it goes from her birth to really to 2020, and then a little bit of updates on her passing and all of that. So I think it's worth having.
How wonderful. I really think people should get a copy of your wonderful book. And it's so great that you have written it, Dancing in My Dreams, which is also a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful, beautiful song by Tina.
Yes.
And I love that one. It's just so wonderful. And it's such an appropriate title, and it's great that you've included all of the spiritual side of her, which I think
Yeah.
is wonderful. And I think we've
Yeah.
had such a great time, and it's been so great talking to you, and thank you for being on my show, Ralph Craig III.
Thank you, Lucas, Alexander. I have known of you for many years. I've watched many of your interviews, and I'm very happy that we finally had this chance to connect, and we will do it again.
Absolutely, we will. Thank you so much. Hope to see you again here online, but also one day in person. That would be wonderful.
Yes,
Thank you so much
absolutely.
for a very wonderful and inspiring conversation.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Namyo Renge Kyo, 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 Hope Bon Tai Ni. Ni di say san du da ma yan du ni ki go ja do bu di ye den den mo yo go di ye ma nang ge na nye we da jo ma na di bu yo bu no di jo we ja ga Chicken arms guy equals Noraji can go Rajin Dan Moya Moga Rick Mojo is and your gators and Majin Musa Jojo is that these are who watcher is no rando Juju Blessed Joe Kajan do not make a judge there is a Yokati Moya Moga these are who that's one of the first prayers. You're turning red.
Thank you so much for watching my show, The Lucas Alexander Show. Please like my videos, subscribe to my channel, and hit the bell for notifications. Your support is greatly appreciated and means a lot. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again very soon.